now I'm at this fourth point of this lecture, which is the fourth Iraq lecture. And this, the sexual assault, and I'm going to use the word rape here because I'm specifically speaking about penetrative acts. And I get that this whole territory is justifiably being torn up and rewritten at the moment. So if I'm not using the right term, please do correct me. That's what I'm after, basically. But I understand absolutely, and as far as I'm concerned, rape is rape. So I get that it's very hard to. In fact, it's very hard, if impossible, to define this as being rape and that as not being rape, and it's another one of these massive gray areas. So please don't be offended. However, what I am talking about is sexually penetrative acts with the penis, and it can be okay. So the rate in the United States is currently 1 in every 6 women will be a rape victim, and this is based on the U.S. National Crime Victimization Survey, that's 16%. Well, in the military, that rate is 1 in 4, which is 25%, right, a quarter. So it's and there's double more than average the rate of known rapists who are in the military. So you have twice the chance of meeting a rapist in the military than you do out in the outside world. Now, actually, you've got more chances than that because, and this is where my math falls apart, because if there are double the number of rapists inside, and it's a small population, it seems to me that your likelihood of bumping into them is that much higher, especially if you're one of 15% of women and they're targeting women. So all of this means that the numbers are not good. And I'm very, very, very nervous when I meet class members who say, I've joined the reserves, and I have, a number of you, I have met soldiers and sailors, and that makes me very nervous. I mean, I always am very concerned for them. And okay, this doesn't touch at all the numbers of sexual assault, right? I mean, just that's why I'm specifically speaking about penetration or penetrative acts, because, and remember that these numbers we're looking at are reported rapes, as we know, not the actual number that occur. So of the reported rapes, 1 in 10 is going to go to trial. And you can imagine how that's going to come out. And I'm going to talk about this in the next lecture. So I'm sort of making a bridge between this lecture and that lecture. And so the hair should stand up on the back of our necks when we read about Kayla Williams joking, with her boys. When they ask directly, what gets you hot? It's Matt to me. Small dicks, unmanly men. I look around. You guys. Screw you, hatchet wound. And I'll stop here because I had luckily forgotten this particular term. And I didn't really think there was an uglier word to use against women than the famous C word, which Eve Ensler, as you know, in her Vagina Monologues, tries to take back. And maybe that was possible 20 years ago when Ensler wrote the play, but now, I don't know. I think it's very hard to see the C word, and as a man, I think it's only fair for me to not use this word, this empowering, as long as it can be. I can't see it. The stakes are too high. Let me just put it this way. I would not want any person referring to any woman I know or female relation of mine using a C word. unless it was a woman they knew very, very well and were seriously kidding around with, in which case I would understand that there was really no animus or anima involved in against it. So hatchet wound is, I suspect, even worse because it's immediately violent. As violent as the C word is, hatchet wound is a very violent image because it suggests that the creation of the space on the body is been made by a cutting tool in a violent way. It's just an extremely violent term. So Williams, however, rolls with it. She understands she's got to survive in this environment, even though this environment seriously sucks. And she's like, yeah, she cannot take it. She cannot take it to heart because she was not going to make it otherwise. I mean, how can she live with this group, let alone live in a war zone with this group? She has to trust them, right? So Williams rolls with it. Listen now, Travis says, what's the difference between a hooker and an onion? That's my joke, I complained, passing the can to him. No one ever cried when they cut a hooker. Hey, what's the first thing a woman does when she gets home from a battered women's shelter? None of them know. The dishes, if she's smart. And this is Williams 168 to 167 to 168. So, again, she has to be not only up on the quote-unquote jokes about women and how they're brutalized and how funny that is, but she also has to be ahead of them. She has to know more than they do. If she's really going to not be bothered by this, she has to essentially own the territory of I don't even want, these are not really even insults. I guess it's supposed to be some kind of protective, I don't know. I don't buy that stuff. I don't think this is just kidding. I think this is just male on female violence, and it can be covered up in it can be covered in a number of different ways. But it's abusive and it's ugly, but certainly ugly, and it's unacceptable. And I don't see any care in it at all. Anyway, the strategy of somebody trying to avoid being a victim is that you know what's going to happen better than your abusers do, basically. And she is determined to survive and to gain respect. But to do that, she has to go further than the men do. She also considers what happens when she's just completely out of patience and tolerance and kindness. And she says on page 238, I consider myself a reasonably compassionate person. I speak the language and I have Arab friends, so I believe I'm better equipped than most soldiers to see these civilians as people, not simply as the enemy. But even for me, there are times that I am feeling overwhelmed by the situation. God, why can't we just kill everyone or leave them to fucking kill each other? Because I cannot care anymore. I cannot walk this line all the time. It's too hard. I get too angry. And this is on page 238. Now, I think this is very fair. I mean, I think that I have no idea how she does it for a day, let alone does it for a year. So the fact that all of these people didn't break down and just start killing people, sort of just, slaughtering people as a matter of course, I don't know. I mean, given the training and given the quote-unquote patriotism, the propaganda, given the training and hatred, which is what I mean by training. I don't mean the military training. Well, the military training is probably one of the few things that prevents out-and-out massacres. Although other people would argue the military training is what creates massacres. And that's very deep water to get into, and we don't have the time for it. That's what just war theory is about, basically. So, so then she goes on to say on page 238 the kinds of things we have heard from the Vietnam veterans, especially the black African-American Vietnam veterans, right? So she says, what are you people doing here? We're here to help you. And you're trying to kill us. Are you insane? Do you even want peace or freedom or democracy? Do you want anything, or do you just want to kill all the time? What's wrong with you? What is wrong with these people on 238? And this is the claim always, not so much of, I was going to say, of the occupier, as it's very much the claim of the colonialist who is just baffled and enraged by the fact that the other will not behave the way they want them to. And it's like, what? Why are you people not following my ethnic rules, because these are basically, remember we were talking about ethnic groups. Well, in this case, the United States forms this one massive ethnic group, even if it's black, white, Latinx, doesn't matter. Male, female, it's all sort of, there's enough of people who are on the team, basically, so that's like, yeah, it forms it's your squad, basically. So perhaps what's wrong with these people is that they had the bad luck to be visited by the United States on a combined imperial corporate mission to, quote-unquote, bring democracy, whatever that means, as well as help secure geopolitical goals and oil reserves, which is the real job that's underway, as well as make whatever it is that Bush and the Vulcans have in their minds about sort of like what they think they're doing, because they will have various different covers for, we're making the world safe for democracy, or, Saddam was a bad man, he needed to be taken out, we needed to change the regime, and so on. And perhaps there's nothing wrong, really, with these people, except that the people who came for them don't see them. They are not able to see them. And as a result, they are not able to help them because they would have to say to those people, what is it that you want? And if they said, well, we want a more secure Muslim state, it's like, well, that's not what the Christians want. What the Christians want is a Muslim state that doesn't really act religiously and is good with business. So they want effectively a Christian state. They want a replication of the United States. That's what they want. So she seems to have limits, and this is one of the interesting things about Williams, is that interestingly enough, she's got these, she hits these barriers, and you're like, yeah, so you're okay up to this point, and then there's no more, So she seems to be honest with us, for instance, about what she's seen and done up to a point. But that breaks down too. Remember that Williams is as much in control as what we see of her life and her stories as O'Brien and Covite are. She is, although this is, provisionally a memoir. And just because something is a memoir doesn't mean that it hasn't been jazzed up, or people haven't lied about what they've said, or they haven't made more of a situation. The same thing is, there are people who have written memoirs, quote unquote, and lots of other people say that didn't happen that way. So we don't know. I mean, only Williams was there of the people who, as far as we know, that were in her squad. Other people haven't written in her squad saying, oh, hey, I was there when Williams says blah, blah, blah. That's not how it went down. So why would we assume that she is telling us the truth? Be very, very careful with all these texts. They are all, as far as I'm concerned, not so much fictional as that they are determined by the viewer to be their vision of what happened. And it's a very particular vision, which doesn't mean it's the true vision, if there is such a thing, because how would you get that, even? So when she finally arrives at her assessment of torture, for instance, she records that, because the Abu Ghraib tortures, which I will talk about in a couple of lectures, the news breaks while they're in country, and she records that she's repulsed by a fellow woman soldier. And there are, in the Abu Ghraib scandal, there were two women who took part in the torture, basically. And so then she talks to, so Williams talks to somebody else, another woman. And this woman says, I don't see the problem with anything that occurred in those interrogations, she told me. I don't see a problem with anything those soldiers did on 251. And what Williams decides is that basically nobody is clean. And she says, all I said was, I'm not going to be part of it. I did not blow the whistle on anybody. So how morally culpable am I on 252? So this is very honest of her to sort of put out there that she didn't stop an event from happening. And as we know, if you take this sort of hardline, what I consider to be holier than thou sort of position, it's like, oh, well, I wouldn't have done that. It's like, be extremely careful about what you would or would not have done, because fundamentally we have no way of knowing what we would have done in a given situation. We just don't know. And this is the thing which I think many of us are, well, I think when you're 18 or 19, it's a lot harder to accept that you don't know how you're going to behave in a bad situation. then when you get to be older and you're like, yeah, I don't know, I really don't. You know, I hope I would behave well, but I might not. You know, so she basically says, I wasn't a whistleblower, so am I not? Or how morally culpable am I? So it's like basically, here's this question. It's like, wow, you know. So what do you're going to judge her? We're going to judge her because we are going to judge her. So I think her honesty serves her well, and she helps to dispose of a good number of myths, which include the idea that women are somehow going to act better under extreme stress, that they're nurturing because they're biologically equipped to have children, and that they won't do or say immoral things because they are men's other better selves. Mein besser Ich, as Schumann says in one of his Lieder. Okay, so let's see what today brings for us in terms of notes